Just about, depending on what date you want to point to on the calendar, the Rays have been the hottest team in baseball. I'll say May 20th, 26-9. They continue to be right on the Yankees' tail as they begin their series here, the short homestand against the A's. We have a chance to talk to Marc Topkin of the Tampa Bay Times, who has been with them all the way, and certainly a lot of dimensions to discuss, whether it's their starting pitching, the speed, the power, and just such a offensive output that they've had this year, led by no less than a rookie, or not a rookie, but a 21-year-old junior Caminero, who's on pace to exceed the 30 home runs that maybe he was thinking about at the beginning of the season. So lots of conversation coming up with Marc Topkin of the Tampa Bay Times. But first, we want you guys to get on down to Breitling Boutique International Plaza Mall. You go to the center of the mall, second floor. It's a tremendous store, great customer service, and you have to check out the beautiful Breitling watches. The Breitling company has been in business making Swiss watches now for 140-something years. They've been at International Plaza Mall for more than 5 years. Check out the beautiful Chronomat watches, the Navitimers, and they have ladies' watches. They have watches for your wife, for your girlfriend. These are sports watches. They are durable as well as good-looking, and they have an array of different colored wristbands that she can choose from. It's Breitling Boutique, and if you hurry now, while supplies last, they've been sort of celebrating the NFL's 104th year anniversary with all 32 different team watches, each watch individual per team while supplies last. They have the team colors on the face of these beautiful Chronomat watches, the logo. You have to see these. These are collector's items. Go to tampabay.com and take a look at the Buccaneers team watch. It's Breitling Boutique. They're at International Plaza Mall. Make sure when you go there, you tell them that you heard about it right here on Sports Day Tampa Bay. All right, always a treat to catch up with Marc Topkin of the Tampa Bay Times, who covers the Rays for us. And Marc, I think this is still true as we do this taping of this podcast. The Rays are getting ready to host the West Sacramento A's, I guess you would call them at this point. But I think they're still at least tied with the Brewers, 26-9 since May 20th. Just been an incredible run for them. They were some 1.5 games back of the Yankees again as we're doing this. And I guess it seems like it was just a little over more than a month ago that we were talking about Steinbrenner Field being a disadvantage. They had lost 9 of 11 there. It doesn't feel like that anymore. So I know we're going to get into a lot of reasons, but just maybe the Cliff Notes version is, man, how did this team suddenly become not just comfortable at home, but really, again, the hottest team going?
Yeah, it's been an interesting transformation, Rick. And you mentioned there's been a couple of dates that their PR staff's come up with that are of note here. May 20th, they've had the best record in the majors since then, more or less. I know losing yesterday, I might change it a drop. May 9th, there was even up until last night when Detroit won, they had the best stretch going back to April 23rd, tied with Detroit. So
Wow.
It was a pretty amazing turnaround after a rough first month. Look, I think there's some things that were factors in it that are kind of obvious for the Rays. They've usually have good starting pitching, and they've had really good starting pitching. They usually have a pretty good bullpen. It's not been the most consistent, but it's been pretty bottom line effective in getting the job done. Only a couple games that have gotten away from the bullpen standpoint. They usually play dazzling defense, and they've played a lot of dazzling defense during the stretch. But if you want the thing that stands out to me has been just the offense and how they've done it, not just the numbers. I mean, you go back to that May 20th date, even with a quiet day yesterday, they've been averaging over 6 runs per game. That's been first in the major. So you combine that with their pitching and defense, they've had the best run differential.
Jeez.
But I think it's just been the way this offense has come to life, and it's something we really haven't seen before. We've seen years where there were some slap hitters, and they did a lot of stealing bases. I mean, you can go back to some of the Carl Crawford, B.J. Upton years. Where they were the speed demons, right? They used their speed more than any team in the majors, and it worked. And then you've had some years where you've had some power, not a ton, but you've had some power. The Carlos Pena years, Zobrist, Longoria in the high 20, low 30 homer range. So you've seen that a little bit, but to see both together, that's rare. You don't see it with a lot of teams. I know there was another stat the other day where at the midway point after 81 games, they were one of only 4 teams in history to have 85 homers and 100 steals or more of both halfway through the season. And one of them was the Big Red Machine. So that's pretty good company to be in right there, right? So that would be, to me, the short version. that they
Yeah.
can play small ball. We've seen, Jake Mangum has added an element they haven't had before. This guy who can just, and I'm not trying to be like over the top here, but it's something that Tony Gwynn did. I'm not saying in any way he's Tony Gwynn, but hit the ball where they're not. When they're shifting you one way, hit it on the ground the other way. When they're playing you straight up, hit it through the hole. He's just got this ability to put the ball in play and force things to happen. Obviously, Chandler Simpson's speed element is remarkable. Just watching how pitchers and defenders panic almost when he does anything, or even when he's at the plate, knowing the impact of that. So you have the speed, the small ball, and then Kevin Cash. I mean, add a character here, the B word, bunting. That was something that he did not like to do for a long time. They've done that. I think they've had 6 squeeze bunts already this year. They're in the top 2 or 3 in the majors, just in bunt base hits and sacrifice bunt attempts. And I went back and looked, 2020, 0 sacrifice bunt attempts. And I think a year, obviously abbreviated schedule, but the 2 years before that, the 3 years after that, they averaged like 7 or 8 total for the year. They're obviously over that already for this year. So all of that, plus having some power. When you see what Junior Caminero is doing, 20 homers. Brandon Lau now 18, 19 homers. Yanni Diaz is in double digits. I think Josh Lowe is going to get there now that he seems to have heated up a little bit. Jonathan Aranda, what he's done is remarkable. If he doesn't get to Atlanta, it's really something that's not an injustice here. So there have been, the power show and the speed. To have that combination has fueled an offense like we really haven't seen in Tampa Bay. And I'm not really sure when you'd say they've ever had it like that before, where it's so good on both ways.
Yeah, they just never had that kind of balance. But we'll get to these guys here in just a second. But you mentioned bunting and that being, something Kevin Cash hasn't done. Is this a Kevin Cash thing? Is this him utilizing the speed that he knows he has, or is it the players taking that on their own and doing it?
Oh, it's coming from above, and it was something that Cash doesn't really like talking about it. I've asked him a couple times, like, was this a major philosophical change? Did your bosses bring this up? Did you just wake up one day and said, "Hey, you know what? Let's bunt some more"? I mean, and he kind of brushes that off and just says, "Look, they had to score more runs. They looked at the personnel they had, and
Yeah,
this seemed like a logical option. You have the players who can do it. You use their skills to the best way you can." So I
yeah,
kind of get that, but some of the players did say it was brought up in spring training that we've got to play more situational baseball. And that includes obviously hitting better runners in scoring position. There was a lot of focus on that this spring,
yeah,
getting guys in from third, finding ways to do that. And, I think you and I hear that and you think, sack fly, ground ball to the right side. Those are typically the 2
hmm,
ways you move runners or try to get guys in, punch it through it, drawn in infield, those type of things. But bunting obviously is an element that they've done. And what's interesting is, Taylor Walls, he should be a good bunter. And if he's not, he needs to be, right, with his skill set. Chandler Simpson with his speed, he needs to be a good bunter. That's going to get him, over the course of a full season in the big leagues, he might get 10 or 20 extra hits that way. And there's a couple other guys. Jake Mangum, you'd assume, should be a good bunter, just the style of game he plays. But they called it the other night with Danny Jansen at the plate, and he got it down, and it worked. And that we looked it up. That was his first sacrifice bunt since 2021. But when you've got that kind of feeling throughout the team, the unselfishness it takes. I mean, it's easy for a guy who doesn't want to do that to say he missed the sign, right, Rick? You've played the game a long time. Be like, oh, I didn't see that sign, whatever. But they've got a buy-in on this, and it's really working.
yeah, and the offense is the biggest story, right? Because this is a kind of a franchise that has struggled at times. We've known about their speed in the past and their defense and pitching. That has always been their DNA. Let's just kind of go through these hitters because, I mean, you mentioned Jonathan Aranda, who we saw in pieces, right? And when he was up, he was sometimes very good, and then when then he would be down again. I guess the idea was when he came to spring training this year, this is your job. You're going to be here for the duration. But you're right. If he's not in Atlanta after damn near leading every category in offense, and a ball he hit the other day that's still traveling in Baltimore, 470 something feet. I've never seen one hit like that. I think there's only been 3 hit like that at Camden Yard. So, is it just a matter of him finally maturing and being comfortable? He knows he can hit, and now he's hitting lefties and righties. It's not like they're platooning this guy.
No, he is in there more. I mean, he Cash kind of, some of the lefties only play against righties, some get to play against both, and he kind of rotates them. And he and Brandon Lau are kind of on that shuttle where they play against some
Yeah,
of them, not all of them. But yeah, I think with Jonathan Aranda, you have to give, first of all, him credit for the talent and the perseverance. This is a guy, and if you remember the story, I've written it a couple times, but he was signed in 2015 as an amateur, a teenager out of Mexico. Carlos Rodriguez was then the Rays international scouting director. They went there to see a free agent who they weren't going to be able to afford to sign, but they wanted to just get a look at him while they could, knowing he was going to sign somewhere else. That guy's name was Randy Arozarena. Randy Arozarena didn't show up for the workout, so Carlos was already at this facility in Tijuana. Their local scouts were like, "Hey, there's a couple young kids. Why don't you at least look at them while you're here?" So they end up signing Jonathan Aranda out of that situation. And it takes him forever to get through the system. 10 years to get from the minor leagues to being a regular in the major leagues. And
Wow.
should have had that opportunity last year. They were going to give it to him.
Yeah.
He got hurt toward the end of spring, freak injury in a fielding drill, breaks I think it was his thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just one of those where like they thought it would heal quick. It didn't. Then he needed surgery. Then the surgery, he tried to rush back and then it wasn't right. And he had to sit out more. Then he got back and he wasn't very good, so they sent him back to AAA. Then he probably pouting a little bit, didn't do real well. Then he ends up pulling an oblique. So he was pretty much a lost year last year till they brought him back up right at the end of August. And you talk about sometimes the value. Look, at that point, they didn't look like they were going to be in the race. They ended up getting back in it, till the last week, and then still fell out of the playoffs, obviously. But he got in there pretty much every day, and he showed them during those 5 or 6 weeks that he was the guy that they thought he was going to be in spring training of 2024. So this winter, I mean, and had obviously many conversations with Neander and Eric Neander and Kevin Cash. And, I think a lot of people asked, I'm sure you did on the podcast, talk radio, everybody else, why aren't they doing more to improve this offense? They're one of the worst offenses in the majors.
Exactly.
And they kind of stuck with it. Like, no, we know what we got. We think we've got guys that are going to be a lot better. And Jonathan Aranda was a key part of that. So he got the opportunity this spring. They just told him you're on the team. You're probably going to bat in the middle of the order. The first base DH thing I didn't know was coming, where he was going to play first more and Yandy would DH more, but it kind of makes sense. Keep Aranda, in the groove there, and he's probably, I think it is fair to say he's a better fielder, not probably. So they gave him the chance, and he has just run with it, and he should, like we said. I mean, he is. I understand fully the reputation Vlad Guerrero has, well deserved, and the full country of Canada behind him in the fan voting. Paul Goldschmidt. Not as much understanding of that one, but it's New York.
It's New York,
and obviously got the vote. So Aranda doesn't get the fan vote. It's hard for Rays to get elected. There have been some, but not a lot. But if either the players vote, which will come out Sunday, and or the MLB appointments, the last 6 spots or so on the roster, somebody's got to have Jonathan Aranda's name on there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've not seen a guy dominate like that in so many categories. The other one that there's several guys I want to discuss, but I think you asked Junior Caminero. He was asked before maybe the regular season began.
Yep.
Kind of, he had an idea of how many home runs he wanted to hit, thought he could hit, that sort of thing. And I think the idea was, well, maybe around 30. Mark, he may get that by the All-Star break. I mean, this guy has just lightened up this offense. And again, obviously Aranda had the tape measure shot, but I've seen him basically one-hand some balls almost out to right center for home runs. Man, what power and bright eyes, and he's got work to do on defense. But when you get a young star like this, it's a nice guy, a nice piece to build around, isn't it?
Yeah, and to do what he's done at 21 years old too, and he'll be turned. We only can say that for another few weeks. He turns 22, I think, next week. So,
Wow.
A few more days. But just the idea of what he's done, the age he is, and you're right, the talent that he has. This was a guy the Rays saw playing like 1 year in the Dominican Summer League as a 16 or 17-year-old, and traded with Cleveland a pitcher for him to get him. And what a great find and a great tribute to their scouts down there that he was. But you're right, he talking to him when he first got to spring training. Remember coming off that crazy Dominican series where he hit that home run.
Yeah,
his
bat
team
flip,
wins it. He had the bat flip heard around the world, or bat toss. It was like an axe toss. I mean, it was about 200 feet in the air. And yeah, he kind of said he hit some goals, and he never came out and said exactly, but we kind of poked around. It definitely felt like he was talking about 30. Then at the end of spring, kind of revisited that, and he goes, "Nah, the new goal now." And he wouldn't say what it was. It obviously was higher, but you're right. He definitely has a chance to hit 40 homers, and I think the Rays record is Pena had 46 one year. I don't know that he's going to quite get there, but what a source of power. And you're right as far as what he shows. I mean, just you look at his exit velocities, just even on outs and line drives and doubles, but some of those home runs he's hit, and you go back to when he first got called up from Double-A at the end of the 2023 season, kind of caught us all by surprise, but they needed somebody. He took batting practice in Toronto, and I don't watch every day, right, batting practice on the road, but
Sure.
you're usually out there on the field or in the press box and paying some attention. He got an ovation from the fans in Toronto, from their fans for the show he put on in batting practice. So that tells you all you need to know about how impressive that was.
Please tell me there's a chance, just a chance, that he gets added to the All-Star game so we can watch him in the home run derby.
Yeah, I was actually wondering that. I had that on my list of things to ask about today. I haven't heard anything about it yet, which usually means, there hasn't been an inquiry yet, but I'd be curious
Yeah.
to find out. And sometimes with a young player, teams and agents, whoever, are a little cautious. They don't want him to go
Sure.
up there and, get all out of whack. And we've seen
Right,
that,
right.
happen, or at least hitters who've slumped after being in it have claimed that was why. But I think if he gets put on the team, which isn't out of the question either. I mean,
Right.
obviously Jose Ramirez is going to be the guy, and that's somebody that Junior looks up to and has speaks with and has a connection with through his agent, and they talk a little bit. So he's going to be the starter. But if Junior somehow gets on that team, then I think maybe since he's already going to be there, I could see him kind of winking his
Yeah.
way into that one and just saying, I'll be in the home run derby too. So we'll see. But yeah, that would be quite a show.
Oh boy, that'd be fantastic. Of course, pitching has always been the biggest part of the Rays, and it's funny, Mark, because this is a franchise that more or less began the notion of openers, right? Out of maybe necessity, maybe out of genius, I don't really know. But now they have a staff that is second only to the Phillies among the starters in innings pitched, some 473 as we again do this podcast, and I I guess it's clearly a testament to how efficient this staff has been, how good it's been, obviously. And then I'm also wondering, like, what's the residual likely to be when we get to September and October?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the only guy that we've heard that, there is a limit on is Drew Rasmussen,
Yeah.
given because, the injury situation coming back from the third elbow surgery. Cash has mentioned, I think he said it was about 150, and Drew goes in the pitch tonight, and where does he? Somewhere maybe in the 80s or so.
Hmm.
So a little ahead of that pace, maybe just a drop. But I think that's why when you see them take him out after 5 sometimes instead of 6, and he's never going to go past 6. I don't think. I think that's kind of a hard
Yeah.
limit. And when they've taken him out after 5 a couple times, even with a lower pitch count, and it's a fair question to be asked, and they'll answer it. But I think that's a bigger picture thing. Like, well, if you can shave an inning off 3 or 4 starts, you're buying another start in essence. If you're going to try to go up against the hard limit, and is that hard limit only through the end of the regular season? Do you get to add on if you're fortunate enough to make the playoffs, or do you have to build that in, to your limit and window there? But I think that's part of why isn't Joe Boyle up here yet? Why Ian Seymour looked good when he came up. They've got these guys down there so that if and when they do need to bring someone up to give a rest or to space it out or to go to a 6-man or to go to
Sure.
a, quasi 6-man, or tell Rasmussen, you're going to pitch every 8th day. We're going to figure out, how we're going to
Hmm.
shuffle this up, whatever. That's part of the reason why is they've been very fortunate. I think somebody looked this up the other day, one of the other writers, that they were the only team to have 5 guys because they just started they're in the 7th. Tonight's the end of the 17th turn through the rotation, I think, with Boz. I mean,
Oh
tomorrow will
well.
be with Boz. I'm sorry. I think they were the only team to get through the rotation with 5 guys with 16 starts each in the majors.
Wow.
And obviously, Boyle made the 1 spot start when they called him up just to space it out a little. So we know there have been years when the Rays have had all kinds of pitcher injuries. They're obviously very pleased to have gotten to this point of the season without any, but is that realistic for a full season? Probably not. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
implying anything's wrong with anybody, but to have 5 guys go wire to wire would be pretty impressive.
It would be, and one of those guys so far has been Taj Bradley. A start ago, he threw maybe his best game. He went 5 2/3, I think, of no hit ball or perfect ball, and then his last outing gave up about a run an inning, about 5 runs or so. Wasn't as effective. I think he has at least another start, maybe 2 before the All-Star break. What is the plan? It seems to me, Mark, that I don't know that he would benefit from going down. It's just been sort of command on his part. You don't want to maybe mess with his confidence. But it seems like Kevin Cash is willing to let this guy work it out at the big league level.
Yeah, and they've shown that confidence in him and that faith in him a couple times at different couple junctures. And remember last year when he had that incredibly good run, then he had that
Right.
incredibly rough run, and
Mm-hmm.
they stuck with him then too. So, I think they feel like he has earned the right to be up here. That they believe in his promise, and maybe a little bit of that is knowing what's the mental aspect. If you send that guy down, is that the kind of guy that crushes and you lose him for a while, or
Mm-hmm.
do you have to balance that too? You got to kind of know everything when you're handling players these days. And I do think they're going to give him some more opportunities, but right, you have other options, and you have to weigh how would a pitcher in Taj's position, in his spot, how would he handle a demotion? Would that help or hurt? What alternatives do you have? How sure are the alternatives you have? Because if you bring a guy up and let's say you bring up Joe Boyle and he doesn't do well, then do you have two problems on your hand, right? You thought you had
Yeah.
one problem, now you have two. So I think it's a combination, but you're also a team that's battled its butt off to get back into a race here that was 5 games out on May 19th and is 10
Mm.
games over as we sit here today, was 11 games over yesterday. He could have taken
Wow.
over first place had they won and the Yankees lost. So you also don't have a lot. You can't just say, "Oh, you're playing with some free money here." Every game matters. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors to consider there. I think the fact that Taj pitched so well in Kansas City got everybody excited. Yesterday wasn't horrible, but it,
No.
it wasn't great, right? If he makes the play or that bunt isn't as good as it was, and that inning is 1 run or no runs instead of 2.
Right.
If Brandon Lau makes that play, then the other runs that Kevin Kelly was in them, but
Charged
they
to
go on
him. Yeah.
Taj's record. So if
Mm-hmm.
that's 3 runs instead of 5, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe we're not looking at it as critically. Only the only 2 strikeouts is kind of what stood out to me, and
Yeah.
30 balls out of 95 pitches is okay, but not great.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think command, and we haven't seen as many strikeouts this year for whatever reason, not as much swing and miss. One guy that they possibly, maybe, I don't know what the odds are here, but Shane McClanahan has been somebody they were hopeful to get back. He's had good reports, he's had bad reports. Where are they now with Shane, and do they think they'll see him in 2025?
The Shane-o-meter.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now it's pointing good. It's pointing promising. I talked to Kyle Snyder about it, wrote something the other day that Kyle said this is as optimistic as he's been throughout this whole process since Shane got hurt in spring training with that weird nerve issue, nerve irritation in the triceps, supposedly unrelated to any of the past elbow injuries and issues. And Shane basically worked his way back on June 7th, threw a full distance bullpen, full go. Didn't feel great afterward. Nothing hurt, nothing that was medically like concerning. Just he didn't feel as he thought he should feel being 100%. So
Mm-hmm.
he kind of shut it down. Wanted to go see a specialist. They flew him out. I think it was to Dallas, saw a nerve specialist. Went through a bunch of stuff. The guy basically told him, "Dude, you're good. Go out and throw the baseball really hard. You're fine." So he came back, and apparently that was all he needed. So they say he has a couple really good work sessions. I think it's tomorrow. He's going to try the full distance bullpen again. They'll probably base that on how he felt yesterday and today, but try that again. And once you get past one of those, then it'll be at 2 or 3 days. How do you feel?
Yeah.
Probably do another one of those. And if you're all clear after a couple of those, then you can kind of start the throwing progression where you're
Mm-hmm.
going to do a couple bullpens. You're going to face hitters a couple times. Maybe you do a sim game for a couple innings where you sit down, and you kind of, essentially simulate a game. I mean, you throw 30 pitches to a hitter, you sit down and wait as if you were sitting out, while the other team was batting. Then you go back out and throw 30 more pitches or something. So, and if you get past that, then you go start a rehab assignment. Starting pitcher rehab assignments tend to take, you know, 3 to 4 weeks because you do one inning, then you got to wait 5 days, then you do
Build it
two
up.
innings, and you got to
Mm-hmm.
do, so maybe the middle of August or so, something like that. But if you want to look at the plus side, and I'll jump ahead on you here, but throw Ha-Seong Kim in there, who should be back,
Right.
we would assume, in the next week or two. He hasn't
Yeah.
done great so far at AAA, but is healthy. If you're going to go to the trade deadline and say you're going to acquire Ha-Seong Kim and Shane McClanahan at the
Oof.
deadline and add
Yeah.
them to a team that's right in the middle of the race, that's a pretty good week, right? I mean,
Those are
if you get
really good
those two guys back
acquisitions. Yeah.
around the All-Star break, around the trade deadline, somewhere in there.
Yeah, they'd be thrilled. You mentioned Kim. I was going to ask you about him. Obviously, that will affect Taylor Walls, who's been swinging the bat a lot better than he did at the beginning of the season. Walls can play anywhere. I would assume, Mark, we'd still see him, I don't know, 3 out of every 5 days or so in the lineup. But what would, if Kim is right, what will he bring? And I mean, they've already obviously have scored a lot of runs, and they're hitting with power. They're stealing bases. This would just even further lengthen an already a great offensive lineup.
And by the way, isn't it weird how like a player's job looks like it might be in jeopardy and they start doing really good? It's just so
Right,
crazy how
right.
that happens
There you
sometimes.
go.
Yeah, look, if they get the Ha-Seong Kim they thought they were getting, the pre-injury Ha-Seong Kim, you're talking about a right-handed bat, which
Yep.
they need
They
because they've
need.
been better from the left side, obviously with Brandon, Josh, and Jonathan Aranda.
Yep.
You get a right-handed bat. You're not talking about a guy with a ton of power, but a guy with kind of a dynamic game. Hit the ball hard, hit it on a line, hit it in the gaps, occasionally hit it out of the ballpark. Good speed, plays a very aggressive up-tempo game. Smooth fielder, natural shortstop, could also play second base. Won a Gold Glove in the utility category for the Padres one year, where he did play a little bit of second. Could also play third. So I think the quality of the offense, the incredible smooth glove, and just the up tempo aggressiveness with which he plays should all be things. Decent base runner, good base runner, actually. Kind of, he's not going to beat Chandler or Mangum in a race probably, but he's going to be up there running bases and pushing it. Kind of like Josh Lowe, kind of quietly gets his 20 stolen bases each year or so, and so
Yeah.
I think it's going to add a dynamic effect to this lineup. That what they've been trying to figure out at Durham is, he looks healthy. He hasn't hit as much, but he's done everything else good. So I think it's just a matter of, is it his timing? Is it, I would assume this is me talking, not them, but is it just, you tired of being at Durham? You're just ready for the bright lights and the big stadiums, whatever it is. But probably got to get a 2 at the start of that batting average rather than a 1 to get promoted at this point.
Yeah, I'll get you out on just a couple of quick ones. Chandler Simpson, has added so much to their lineup. He went down. He accepted that demotion. He's now back. Is he back to stay, Mark? And have you ever? I mean, it's been a while since we've seen a guy that can be as disruptive as he is once he gets on the bases.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can tell you definitively he's back to stay, but I think it's in his hands. I think it's up
Yeah,
to him if he gets to stay. And, when they sent him down, there was two pretty specific things. You need to be better in the outfield. You need to take more charge. You need to make the plays. Don't worry as much, about the crazy plays, but make all the plays on the balls that we know you can get to. They've worked on some cutoffs and relays. I've noticed. Just he doesn't have the greatest arm, but trying to find a way to get that ball into the infield. Let Walls throw it, let Lau throw it. Just get it to them if we need to, but get the ball into the infield. And then the other thing was the on base percentage. His on base percentage in the big leagues was very right around the bottom of the threes. They want that on base percentage closer to the top of the threes, and
sure.
if he can get to 370, 380 between walks, and don't fly out as much, hit the ball on the ground, let your speed,
Hmm.
work for you. It's hard to quantify how helpful he can be.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the impact, for the batters after him, the impact on the pitchers, the impact on the way the defensive players are positioned. There's so many things that seem to change when he's at the batter's box or on the bases.
Yeah, I'll tell you, they're only at the midway point or thereabouts, not quite to the All-Star break yet. But this Rays team certainly looks like it's one that's going to be around for the duration here. And I tell you, Mark, I look at the AL East, and like I said, they're just about a game and a half out of first place as we speak. May run down the Yankees, but right behind them, the Blue Jays are 3 back, and even the Red Sox can't count them out. This is still maybe one of the toughest divisions in baseball is to figure out. And you could have a number of teams make the postseason.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's easy to kind of write off Boston the way they started, and then they make the weird trade with Devers. But yeah, that's obviously still a team that's got some talented players. And they had some guys injured that were coming back or are coming back. Bregman's the key guy, of course.
Sure.
Toronto's just kind of been hanging in there the whole time, right? And
Yeah.
they've gone through some rough stretches, but they're hanging in there too. And look, the Yankees aren't going to go quietly. If the Rays are right on their back, or Toronto is, they're going to make some moves at the deadline and add to their talent pile and their payroll. So I agree. I think this is going to be an interesting second half of the season. But going back to what you said in the open, the Rays had that 1-11 stretch at Steinbrenner Field. They started, I think, 9-14. and it looked like it was going to be a pretty long, hot, miserable summer, right? And the way they've played over this last month or so, and then there's going to be a stretch. I mean, they're going to have a 2-8 stretch or something like that, or 3-7 stretch, and we're all going to say, "Oh, is this the end? Is this magic ride over? Is this back to reality or something?" And it'll be on them, obviously, to show it isn't. But I think when you stay as hot as they have for as long as they have and have won games in so many different ways, that kind of bodes well for what you can do over the rest of the season.
It really does, and they're going to have lots of road games coming up, of course, with this the schedule that's trying to prevent the heat, the rainouts, all those things, but a lot on the back end, including a 10-game road trip after this short homestand, and enough time for you to wash your clothes, Mark, and get back on the road.
Exactly. It was funny. I was asking one of the players about that yesterday, and he's a married player, and he said, "Well, I've got some help." I said, "What about the single guys?" He goes, "Yeah, I don't know if they're going to get laundry done or not."
You might just have to keep it in the suitcase, keep it packed. Yeah, we'll see.
Exactly.
He's Marc Topkin of the Tampa Bay Times. You can read him on tampabay.com, and just the best baseball writer going. Mark, thanks for your time as always. Good luck, man.
Anytime, Ricky.
The Rays will continue their series with the A's today, and it's always great to catch up with Marc Topkin. Get your mailbag questions in if you have a chance. You can do that by reaching us on X or Twitter at SportsDayTB. You can reach me at NFL Stroud, or my email address is rstroud@tampabay.com. Go see our friends at Breitling Boutique International Plaza Mall. Check out the beautiful watches, NFL team watches available for all 32 teams while supplies last. They have watches for men, for women, your wife, your girlfriend, sports watches. She's going to love them. It's Breitling Boutique International Plaza Mall. Let them know that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. For Steve Versnick, I'm Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Have a great day, everybody.